the middle is Capt. Brian McNulty, who joined the City of Milwaukee Fire Department in 1999. In 2009, Capt. McNulty assumed duties as the director of the Milwaukee Fire Department's Heavy Urban Rescue Team, which is responsible for providing technical rescue capabilities within the city and surrounding communities. He served as the company commander of Milwaukee's Rescue Company No. 2 since 2012. Brian teaches programs of both forcible entry and vehicle extrication for the department's fire academy. And in addition to teaching fire personnel, he has provided forcible entry training to the Milwaukee Police Department's Tactical Enforcement Unit, the local FBI, and the U.S. Marshal Service. And we're honored also to have Capt. Brian McNulty with us this evening. We'll go now to Capt. Brian McNulty of the Milwaukee Fire Department. Thank you for coming, Capt. McNulty. First question I'd like to ask you has to deal with a book that we've talked about quite a bit already this afternoon. On our reading list is Lieutenant Colonel Pete Blaber's book, The Men, the Mission, and Me. We recommended Lieutenant Colonel Pete Blaber's book, The Men, the Mission, or The Mission, the Men, and Me, which along with seminal works like Warfighting and Void, holds critical lessons that have unlimited potential for application on the fire ground. And you've been to a lot of very dangerous fires in the city of Milwaukee. How does Pete Blaber in his book define the difference for you between risk management and risk aversion? And how does it apply to the fire ground?
First, I want to just start out. The book, The Mission, the Men, and Me, kind of holds a special spot for me. A couple of my guys and I were jammed up last year, and I was kind of struggling to get through that. And I reached out to Jason, and Jason kind of said, I said, hey, I have insomnia, I'm not sleeping. Is there anything you can do? And he recommended a good book, and Jason recommended this book. So I just want to thank Jason, whether it's appropriate at this point or not. But as far as risk aversion and risk management, after reading this book and my own personal take on it, I look at it as risk management as identifying hazards and taking steps to control or mitigate those hazards. We know that in the fire service, we can't always avoid them, but we take steps to make them, as safe as possible so that we can do our job. And risk aversion, as Blaber states it, is that his big push in the book is about developing the situation. Basically, kind of taking pause and looking at an incident, in our case, being a fire, and looking at it and saying, through my, through context, through my past experience, how best to deal with that. And when some people look at it, they would say, they would look at it and they wouldn't take that pause, and they, would jump to a conclusion, and their instinct would be to just totally, to fall into risk aversion, and they would either underreact or overreact or not act at all. I guess to best explain it, I don't want to, just sit up here and tell fire stories, but I think if I tell it through a fire, I can express best to you how I look at risk aversion compared to risk management. So we recently went to a fire, and it was a standard building in Milwaukee, 2-story wood frame bungalow, and we have heavy fire shooting out the front and throughout most of the first floor, and there's a report of somebody trapped on the second floor, a child. So if we would look at it, when I initially got off the rig, the way we came in, I was kind of under the risk aversion. I was looking at it, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of fire. We shouldn't be going in here. A truck company said they were going to go do vent enter search. And I had to take some pause and let my mind kind of travel through, the things that I had, in my database, my situational awareness, and look at it and say, okay, let's kind of break this apart and look at it and see what we can manage here, and look at it through a risk management. point of view. We have a heavily developed fire, but as I came around and looked at the rest of it, I said, okay, there are spots. An engine had been laying a line. There were spots in the building that weren't involved in fire. There were ladders going up, and you kind of get to the point, or I got to the point, where instead of doing risk aversion, I was able to do risk management with the rest of the companies on the scene, and that was able to put us in a position, to effectively go in and search the building.
Someone else that Jason talked about today, Colonel John Boyd, closely analyzed history's most effective fighting forces and commanders, searching for principles that allowed seemingly inferior forces to meet formidable enemies. The principles he discovered form the backbone of maneuver warfare as explored by LUF for the past few years at our conferences, and these principles have proven to significantly enhance the practitioner's success on the battlefield and on the fire ground. I would like you to tell us particularly about mutual trust and the leadership contract, and in your experience as a captain in the City of Milwaukee Fire Department, how mutual trust and leadership contract apply to the fire ground.
So first off, I think the idea of mutual trust, that's really what it all boils down to. That's where it's, that's your basis. Without mutual trust, I'm not left with much. I think I become an ineffective firefighting force. Last year's panel, I was listening to Lieutenant Commander Brad G. from the Navy SEALs, and you asked him a similar question about mutual trust, and his answer was, if we didn't have that, the SEAL teams would probably not operate as the SEAL teams do. So with that being said, that mutual trust is so important. Why I think it's important is because it takes a group of individuals and turns them into a greater power than just those. And in my case, we have 5 individuals on the rig. Having mutual trust broadens our abilities. And I'll take a minute to I was trying to think of an analogy for this, and this is the one I came up with, is that I have a 4-year-old son who plays soccer. And if you guys have ever gone to watch a 4-year-old play soccer, it's absolutely hilarious. All the kids just go together in one little group, and they just go around the soccer field. And if there's 6 kids on the field, all it is 12 little legs of fury, and they just kick, and nobody does anything, and nobody scores goals, but as a parent, it's extremely rewarding. And if I didn't have mutual trust in my 5 guys, and I see this on the fire ground, we would move around as my son's soccer team does. We would just, we'd be on the soccer field, or we'd be at the fire ground, but we wouldn't really be that effective. We might get 1 or 2 things done, but we wouldn't be that effective. Because I would be standing there saying, all right, I really don't trust you guys, so because I don't trust you, I'm going to keep you very near to me, and I'm not going to let you have your input or do the things that you're very skilled at. I'll kind of lead that whole thing. I'll keep it very close. And I think sometimes officers think that that's safe to do that, and that's why they do it. They keep their people safe. They keep their people close and don't let them go too far out. What I've learned I've been an officer for 6 years, is the value of mutual trust. And what I've learned is that when you do what they do, in the book War Fighting, they talk about that when you have mutual trust, you're able to exploit, or you should exploit in your people, traits like boldness, initiative, creativity, and intelligence. And if you don't have that mutual trust, you never get that out of your people. You're just one singular group. So as an officer, when I'm able to do that and I get to that point of mutual trust, we just become that exponentially greater force, I think. We're greater than 5 people. We're moving around, accomplishing a lot of tasks and accomplishing them very skillfully. So then we move into kind of the leadership contract. And in Certain to Win, they talk about, so you establish this mutual trust. And then once you have that, and you have this ability to communicate implicitly because you have this mutual trust, that you're kind of able to you're kind of able to move to the mission point. And you're able to say, all right, kind of speak in broader terms and not explicitly tell everyone, okay, you have to do this and you have to do this and you have to do this. That your group of individuals understand what the overall mission is, and that they understand that you're assigning them that mission with their best, with their welfare in mind. And they're looking at you and saying, okay, I have the trust in my leader that he wouldn't put me in an area that he hasn't A, prepared me for, B, wouldn't put himself in, or C, that he thinks I'm just, that would be a blind effort, that I'm just, that doesn't have some strategic or life-saving purpose. So we get to that leadership contract, and I think that's when you really see it work well. You kind of asked me how this works on the fire ground, and I'll go back to the fire that I talked about just previously. So you have, and I'm going to kind of open up here a little bit. I want to tell this story, and I'm going to talk about a truck company that was going to do a vent inner search, but they kind of backed out. And I don't want to talk about it like they failed at their job, because I think the failure was much earlier. And I want to talk about it that my crew went in and was able to effect a rescue. And it's not just because, we have more courage or, more whatever, I don't want to use a barroom term to describe what we describe that as. But we kind of, before that moment, because of our mutual trust and our training and this contract, we were able to, separate, and my members were able to use their boldness and initiative and their skill and their will and all those things and attack that scene from a different view. So if I looked at it, we had an inexperienced younger guy on the ladder. He was going to do vent inner search, which was, as far as fire goes, it's obviously that's subjective to people in the room, but I would say through my experience that this was kind of a hairy one. You look to one side off the ladder, you see a lot of fire blowing out. The line hasn't hit it yet. You're popping the window, you're getting good smoke out the window. And he made the decision not to go. And he came down, cleared the ladder, and when we got to the top, I used the experience I had, and we went in and were successful. And when we got back to the firehouse, there was a lot of talk about the guys, and I said, well, let's view it not through what we think or what people might view as their failure, their ability to not act, but let's look at it through how our teamwork works and our mutual trust works and how that made us successful. Because what mutual trust allowed me to do at that scene is when we pulled up, I was able to tell I took the junior guy with me. We were going to go right to the ladder. I was able to split my crew and take 2 members and have them throw up additional ladders. So we were not only mitigating risk, but we were, getting more points of entry. And I just told them to get up additional ladders. And then I told my driver, I said, you go with the line, and make sure that line is doing what it's supposed to do. And if it's not, get back to me, or, hold the line. Don't leave us hanging out above. And so that was like, kind of the general plan. It wasn't very specific, like take a 14-foot ladder or, do this, that, or that. We just said the general plan. And mutual trust, the beauty of it is that now those guys are going around the fire scene, and now their initiative and their boldness and their experience is taking over. And what ended up happening was the driver who went in with the line assisted with the line, didn't have to push them. The engine did a great job. But once they knocked that down, the primary fire room, he found the stairs to get up to the 2nd floor. He knew that they had control of the fire, so he comes up the stairs. I didn't tell him to come up the stairs after, he knew the line was in a good place. He acted on his own, so he comes up the stairs. The 2 other firefighters that were throwing up ladders that I really didn't tell them, which ones to throw up, they throw up ladders. Once they get ladders to all the windows, they decide, okay, that task is done. They use their boldness and their initiative, and they get on those ladders, and they come through. So without ever me telling anybody to do it, all the tasks were accomplished, plus then we ended up with 5 members searching on the above the fire floor. And, to me as an officer, that's just, poetry in motion or whatever. And, I say I have the honor of working in the company I do. And what's telling you that, what I'll also tell you is that takes a lot of time to build that. And it not only takes time to build it through, training and shared experiences and all those other things, but it also takes time to maintain it. I just want to touch one thing Jason talked about was the mission, the men and me. And I have a copy of the mission, men and me, just the piece of paper with those words on it, and it hangs on my bulletin board in the office. And I don't hang that there to be like, just have a piece of paper there. I actually use it to cover our safety policy. That's a joke. But it's there, so it's just it's simple in its statement. But what it does is when I look at it, it reminds me that that's the order that things should run. And, some of the simplest things in life, we have to remind ourselves, not to take them for granted. And so when I look at that, it reminds me not to take that for granted and to make sure that I'm operating in that way. So sorry, that was kind of a wordy answer.
So Captain McNulty, you've been jammed up pretty bad and nearly lost your life at a fire. What advice would you give to a young firefighter that would motivate and prepare them for a life or death moment that they may encounter?
So I wasn't exactly sure, when we first chatted about this question a little bit, but I kind of came up with a few things that, and not in no particular order. I'm sure they could be moved around, but kind of a list of things that I would impart. One would be to master the basics. That you have to know your job. You have to know the tools on the rig. You have to know how to use them. In many cases, every tool has more than one purpose. You have to take the time to be professional in your preparation and to make sure that you know those tools inside and out. The other thing that we learned about this morning through the presentation by Smith and Lopez is that preparing not only our mind but our body physically. When we get into some conditions, it's really going to come down to being physically prepared, to survive under the conditions that you're put under. So I think that's extremely important. Never underestimate your surroundings. I'd make sure to pass that on. When I was a young fireman, I would go by buildings, and maybe firemen, this is a common thing, but I would go by buildings and I'd say, oh, that's a fireman killer. And I'd look at a warehouse, so, then that, that building and that building. And in 2010, I got in a situation where a company got jammed up, and on the way out, I got caught on the stairs. And it was I'll refer to it as just a shotgun shoebox size of a house. And I thought to myself in this fleeting moment, I thought, I'm going to die in this shoebox size house. And every time after that, I stopped taking things for granted. I realized that, there isn't a fireman killing building a house. You can't drive down the street and see it. Are there some more than dangerous than others? Yes. But every building that has a fire in it, could come up and bite you. So I'd make sure that they don't underestimate it. I'd tell the guys to listen to your gut. In fire psych, there's a part in the book where Lieutenant Convoy, I'm pronouncing it right, talks about a fire that he had in the Bronx where him and 10 other members were operating on top of a taxpayer, and he had an instinct. He didn't have a feeling. He couldn't express it in words, but he had this gut feeling that it was time to get off the roof, and shortly after that, it collapsed. And I think that's an important thing for firefighters to do as you move through your job and you get experience. Just because you couldn't write it down or quantify it doesn't mean that it's not a feeling you should act on. And the last thing would be, in the list I have, is realistic training. Seek out realistic training. Provide your members with realistic training. And I say that in the fact of, in warfighting, they talk about the Marine Corps should provide their Marines with training that provides friction, adversity, and stress. And I think that holds true. I mean, that's what fires are, right? There's friction, there's adversity, there's stress. So we should train for our goal that when we go to fires, that we can handle some of those things, that we can control some of those things. And I had an interesting conversation one time. I was giving a talk to a local fire department, and I was telling people to stress their members out in training. Not all the time, but take the time to stress people out because under the worst conditions, you don't want that to be the time that it's the first time they've ever been stressed out, because they're not going to react well. And one of the people came up to me and they said, well, that might work for you, but that wouldn't work for me as an officer because, my guys just wouldn't like that. And they probably wouldn't come back, or it was a full-time department. I don't know how that works, but I said to him, and my answer to him was, well, are you ordering those same people, into burning buildings? And his answer was yes. And, if you want to talk about risk, that's what risk is to me, is not training your people and, expecting them to do things that you wouldn't take the time to train them to do or give them the tools to do.
Thank you. Last night, you and I had an opportunity to talk just a little bit about some of these fires, the recent grabs of training, some books, and some other things. And one thing we touched upon, we didn't really get to the end of what I asked you about now. And has something happened to you during your career, even in the last couple of years, to change fundamentally what you feel about the importance of mindset?
Absolutely. So, like a lot of other firefighters, I was, of the mindset of, firefighting is bulwark. It's using the Halligan and the flathead and the saws and breaking down doors. And, there wasn't much of the, the mental aspect of it. I really never thought about it. I thought all about the physical aspect. And last year I even attended the conference, and that's when Fire Psych, we got a copy of Fire Psych, and I kind of flipped through it. And the forward portion of it is written by a person that you'll hear tomorrow, Lieutenant Steve Mitchell from the Boston Fire Department. And he kind of talks about there that the first time you talked with him, Chief, that he was very skeptical of it. He's like, what does this have to do with firefighting? Firefighting is kind of what I described, a physical deal, and there isn't much room for the mental part of it. And, he talked about a high-rise fire where he was with a civilian and he was sharing his mask and it wasn't going very well. And he talked about that after that fire, I think he started to gain an appreciation for the mental side of it. And but for that, when he was first thinking about it, and how he talks about it in the forward is that he talks about, he would thought about RIT situations and Mayday situations as a physical event, right? That's how we trained for him. That guy's down over there, put him in something, drag him over here, drag him over some obstacles, force the door. So we think we're trained to think about RIT and Maydays as a physical. That's going to be a physical action to respond and to make the difference there. And on December 2nd of last year, we went to a 8-family, 2-story apartment with reported people trapped on the second floor. A couple people had jumped. And when we pulled up, a good friend of mine was the first in truck boss, and they had heavy fire in the front. And he said, "You know what, Brian, go to the back. There's a report of somebody trapped in the upper." So without going into all the details of it, we get up onto the second floor and we start searching. And one of my members goes to the right and one goes to the left. And shortly after that, I heard a guy from outside yell, "Hey, you just lost the stairs." And I turned around and I looked down the stairs, and like in the movies where you'd always tell people firefighting isn't like the movies. You just see smoke, you don't see a lot of flames. Well, all I saw was flame coming up the stairs, and I had the uh-oh moment. And so I was kind of searched for the door to close the door. The door was gone, and I told the one member to my left, I said, "Ben, crawl to the back. I know there's a window back there. Take the window. We're going to go out the window." I called to Danny, who was in the front. I said, "Danny, come on, we're going to go." And he crawled by me. I said, as he crawled by me, he said, "Cap, I'm burning." He goes, "Yep, Danny, we're going to go out the window." So we get back to the window, and where my changing event is that the three of us successfully got out the window. And so for a long time, I thought after, we were banged up and injured pretty bad. And I thought long and hard about it. And I thought, well, what got us out that window? And so I thought about, well, there was a lot of things. There was the character of my two guys. There was the absolute strength of will, their courage, however you want to do it. I'm sure that I think there was some divine intervention because some of the seconds I just can't account for. And so I've having these conversations with my guy, and Danny, a very young firefighter, but a great firefighter, says to me, "You know what, Cap? One of the parts I think that saved me and saved the group of us in turn was the fact of how we had prepared prior to that moment, and that we had stressed ourselves out, and that we were able to communicate so calmly." And I can only describe it this way: if this was the hallway that we were in, and that was the window we were going to go out, and we reenacted this, we would talk like, "Okay, hey, we're going to go out the window. Okay, we're going to go out the window. Yeah, you're going to go out." And that's exactly how these guys talked. It was to the point where I say there was, if we had 10 seconds, so let's just a 10-second window. And that was the difference, that once you reached 10 seconds, things were going to get exponentially worse. And if one of those guys would have done one thing differently, if they would have, freaked out and crawled the wrong way, if they wouldn't have done the courageous things they've done, if they would have, not listened to my orders, if they wouldn't have been calm, that gets much worse for all three of us. So I think it was after that, and then during my recovery stage, and after talking to Danny, that I kind of had this light bulb moment. And then I picked up Fire Psych again, and I kind of started reading through it again, and I started to see that though I spent a lot of time, the first 16 years of my career saying, well, firefighting is a physical aspect, I started reading the book, and then I would see things and pick things out where I thought, well, I've kind of been doing that. I mean, I hadn't read the book, but subconsciously I was doing that. And then I read in other things like the chapter on concentration, where if you don't train yourself to concentrate, to prepare for these moments, it just gets worse. Your ability to think, your ability to problem solve, all those things change. So I definitely had a change because of that incident with how I look at the mental side of firefighting.
Thank you very much. And so I would ask you if you were giving advice to a new firefighter or someone here at the conference who hadn't considered the mental aspect or the human factors of firefighting, is it enough to acknowledge that they're important or foundational, or is it really necessary as firefighters that we expend some effort in becoming students of mindset and mental health?
No, absolutely. I think you have to, just as you would prepare, to learn how to, force a door with a Halligan and a flathead, you have to prepare for the mental side of the firefighting as well. And I think, the speakers here do an excellent job of it. And, real quickly, I'll just run through this. I was looking to do a drill one day, and we have this SCBA confidence course out at school. And so I told the guys, well, we'll go out there. It was, humid. They were yelling. They weren't happy that we were going out to drill. So we go out there. I purposely drain down one guy's bottle. I send him in there. And then we got to send in. We're kind of doing a simulated RID. It's confined space. It's a pain space to work in. So the drill isn't going well. We, killed 2 other guys because they run out of air. They come out. The whole company is complaining with each other. They're yelling at each other. You did this. You did that. And at first I thought, whoa. But then one of the guys said, well, let's run the drill again. So we ran the drill again. And we didn't fail as bad that time. We still failed, but we didn't do it as bad. But what I noticed afterwards was that they started to talk to each other differently. They talked to each other. They communicated differently in the space, and they communicated differently afterwards. And what I took away from that was that they had conditioned themselves mentally to deal with the stress and were able to focus on the important things to kind of work their way through those problems. So I think definitely that you can prepare yourself for the mental side of it.
Thank you very much, Capt. And we're thankful that you made the trip from Milwaukee to share some of your experiences and insight with us. And perhaps we'll have some questions for you. And thank you very much.
Thank you.